It was 9:48 p.m. when the garage sealed shut. That simple action marked the final ordinary second, just an entryway securing itself. Illumination faded out within a residence nestled deep in the Catalina Foothills of Tucson, Arizona. An 84-year-old resident prepared for sleep by herself, surrounded by peaceful southwestern night air. Not a single neighbor suspected trouble brewing nearby. Law enforcement received 0 calls and no visitors approached the porch. The surrounding community remained completely silent. That deep winter calmness that blankets the region once daylight fades past the Santa Catalina peaks. Yet a sinister plan had already begun, a deeply calculated scheme, a presence waiting in the shadows. We must first understand Nancy Guthrie's life prior to that January 31st, 2026 evening. This elderly woman was 84. Having resided around Tucson exceeding 50 years, she successfully brought up a trio of kids there, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron. The University of Arizona employed her for almost 2 decades, and faith played a huge role in her routine. She never missed logging into weekly online congregations as alongside her best pal. Her mind remained incredibly acute, matching her fierce self-reliance. Residing solo at her Catalina Foothills property, that exact residence which secured itself at 9:48 p.m. during the weekend. Physically, however, moving around proved difficult for her. Missing her required everyday prescriptions wasn't an option, especially given her delicate cardiovascular condition. Savannah, her child, eventually shared those details, openly maintaining a firm tone while her gaze revealed massive, unspoken pain. Let that truly sink in. An 84-year-old solitary senior requiring vital meds while a lurking figure hidden in the arid darkness possessed all this intimate knowledge. The perpetrator clearly studied their target thoroughly. They watched her every move. Let us trace her steps back to her arrival. The weekend kicked off just like countless others do for households nationwide. Right around 5:32 p.m. on January 31st, 2026, Nancy caught a rideshare toward her nearby kid Annie's place shared with partner Tomasochi. The group shared a meal and enjoyed each other's company. Just a standard Tucson gathering, cozy, relaxed, and utterly typical. The exact type of get-together nobody expects to end in tragedy. Relatives eventually transported the elderly woman back. Their ride pulled directly onto the recognizable concrete of her Foothills estate. The automated bay lifted, allowing her entry before promptly sealing her inside. 9:48 p.m. Her driver observed until she was completely secure indoors, then proceeded to head out. Never again would Guthrie's relatives witness her enjoying a calm, everyday state. Obviously, they remained blissfully unaware of the impending horror. Why would they worry? They had a wonderful time together. The residence appeared untouched, and absolutely nothing seemed out of place. However, the ensuing sequence of events continues to baffle law enforcement completely. During the initial dark hours of February 1, 2026, a disguised figure materialized right on Guthrie's porch. Security footage recorded the suspect purposefully dipping his face to evade the recording sensor. Next came a highly strategic move. Grabbing a nearby decorative shrub, he snapped off a leaf and obscured the recording lens entirely. He didn't shatter the device or yank it down. He masked it with precision, a subtle choice that ex-federal profilers analyzing the tape highlighted as an incredibly telling detail. Obscuring, rather than breaking the equipment, implies the attacker actively avoided startling the homeowner with a scary live feed, ensuring she wouldn't keep the locks engaged. Keeping her clueless was vital to gain entry. The intruder clearly pre-planned everything right down to this microscopic tactic. Random wanderers simply do not operate with this level of calculated precision. This reflects a stalker, an individual who meticulously monitored her home and analyzed the access points, perfectly predicting the security system's mechanics. Merely moments shy of 1:50 a.m., her porch surveillance completely died. Roughly 20 minutes passed before another exterior lens picked up activity in the yard. Following that, right around 2:28 a.m., a chilling development left detectives absolutely stunned. The victim's implanted heart tracker completely shut down forever. Losing that medical transmission remains the single most crucial piece of technical evidence in the investigation. It provided detectives with a definitive time frame to zero in on for their search. Authorities strongly suspect the attacker forcefully abducted the senior citizen during the gap, starting when the porch feed cut out. Right before 1:50 a.m., until the heart monitor lost connection at 2:28 a.m. That leaves approximately 40 blacked-out minutes in a peaceful subdivision where absolutely zero witnesses noticed any disturbance. Make sure to smash that subscribe button if you haven't already joined the Case Files collective community. We dive into ongoing unsolved mysteries with incredible investigative depth. Each upload relies strictly on authenticated details, proven schedules, and hard proof. The investigation remains ongoing. Fresh details are on the way. Stick around for our upcoming discoveries. Also, go ahead and leave a remark below. Which city are you tuning in from today? People nationwide and globally are captivated by this mystery. Let us know your exact location below. Early Sunday, February 1st, 2026, a close pal anticipated NY logging into their regular online worship session. Nancy never logged on. Her friend called without any luck. She quickly contacted Annie and the remaining relatives. Relatives showed up at NY's place right before midday. Puma County officers pulled up shortly afterward. The scene quickly proved this was anything but a basic welfare visit with an easy answer. DNA material tied directly to Nancy Guthrie turned up right outside her front door. She had completely vanished. That kicked off an inquiry destined to become a highly scrutinized disappearance throughout the United States. Federal agents stepped in. Various departments poured massive manpower straight into the Catalina Foothills area. In a matter of days, upwards of 400 detectives chased down clues. Public hints flooded in continuously. Detectives started collecting and analyzing security camera video throughout the entire nearby residential community. Authorities chased down every single tiny clue. Very quickly, police made a subtle move that totally redirected the whole search. Police seized a specific vehicle, a blue Honda CRV, which happened to be the exact ride that brought Nancy Guthrie back during her final sighted evening. Once crime lab techs secured that automobile along with its seats, trunk handles, rugs, and unseen particles it secretly gathered, the guy behind the wheel instantly became a massive focal point throughout the entire police inquiry. However, discovering whatever the feds uncovered within that ride and its ultimate impact demands a totally separate discussion. See, whenever crime scene experts strip an automobile down to the studs, they aren't merely hunting for visible stuff. They are actively searching for stuff that a perpetrator attempted to clean up or hide entirely. Shining a black light on those distinct elements reveals completely different stories to a trained eye. All mysteries hit a turning point where attention moves away from the initial location toward a traveling piece of evidence on wheels. Regarding Nancy Guthrie, that shift happened during the initial 48 hours involving a motor vehicle. Police took swift action. Shortly after NY vanished into thin air, Puma County cops hauled away a blue Honda CRV parked directly on Annie Guthrie's property. Tommaso Cioni utilized this exact ride to drop Nancy off on the night of January 31st. It parked at her Catalina Foothills pad around 9:48 at night, paused until the garage door fully shut before finally disappearing into the dark desert. That automobile officially became a clue. Authorities seized it with fast calculated precision. Crime scene experts never dawdled during these intense situations. Wasted time allows tiny clues to vanish, loose threads to blow away, and cellular fluids to completely deteriorate. If that ride held any secrets regarding Nancy Guthrie's fate, detectives had to uncover them immediately, which they accomplished. On February 4th, 2026, reporter Ashley Banfield dropped a heavy bombshell during her audio show. She quoted a respected police insider who supposedly possessed first-hand intel regarding the ongoing search. The informant claimed Tommaso Cioni might be their main target. She clarified that these thoughts were purely speculation, not hard facts. However, the negative impact on community opinion happened immediately. People nationwide suddenly linked Tommaso Cioni to being a potential killer despite zero arrests, an absolute lack of concrete proof or any formal police announcements backing it. Chief Chris Nanos answered the rumors head-on. He labeled the broadcast irresponsible, stating clearly that nobody was officially considered a person of interest yet. He aggressively denied labeling relatives as top targets, explaining that grabbing the automobile was simply a normal procedural move. It is a basic, predictable protocol detectives follow whenever a ride links up with a vanished individual's final whereabouts. Yet typical police protocols frequently appear highly suspicious to everyday folks watching. Consider the optics for average citizens right then. Cops grabbed an automobile and kept it locked down without giving reasons. You had reporters broadcasting leaks about the driver being guilty while the chief denied it without actually exonerating anybody. Meanwhile, Nancy Guthrie remained undiscovered. Imagine being in those shoes for a second. Where does your brain automatically jump? Plus, society's snap judgments never pause for lab reports. Rumors spread as fast as breaking news alerts hit screens. During early February 2026, that rapid gossip severely wrecked Tommaso Cioni's reputation right in the open. Fast forward to February 16th. The county sheriff issued a totally definitive public statement. Nancy Guthrie's immediate relatives and their partners were formally cleared of suspicion. The man held his ground. He delivered the news bluntly, then dropped a remark that instantly crushed weeks of wild rumors. Her loved ones showed immense grace and helpfulness throughout. He emphasized that claiming otherwise was simply vicious and incorrect. On paper, that declaration put a hard stop to any public scrutiny surrounding her relatives. Yet by March 11, 2026, that blue Honda CRV was still sitting locked up in police impound. Crime journalist Dave Mack verified the SUV waited at an auto garage, remaining under Puma County Sheriff jurisdiction. According to his reporting, mechanics were rebuilding the ride bolt by bolt following an intense evidence sweep. Hearing those exact words reveals a crucial detail. Standard police searches mean getting your ride back whole. Needing professional reconstruction means detectives literally stripped it to the frame. They detached, inspected, tested, and cataloged absolutely every loose part. Chairs unbolted, carpets rolled up, door panels stripped, and cargo bays dismantled. Technicians used specialized lighting to scour tiny crevices for debris. Pulling off that teardown eats up massive time and funding. Detectives never go that far without solid motives. The relatives are innocent, yet the SUV remains trapped. Caught squarely between those details is a mystery the public knows nothing about. What exactly did crime scene techs uncover? The truth might be mundane. Cops frequently keep cars way after ruling people out just to sweep for GPS trackers, looking for clues of break-ins or proof that a stranger drove it behind the owner's back. Still, it absolutely means something. While lab experts kept tearing through the SUV, detectives chased down another major clue potentially capable of solving the biggest mysteries in this case. This clue had nothing to do with cars. It turned up in the dirt, a single hand covering. Dropped by a suspect smart enough to block the security lens, yet reckless enough to leave physical proof behind. Whenever cops impound cars for evidence, folks usually imagine detectives simply popping doors and shining beams underneath the chairs, checking the dark spots. Reality operates completely differently, especially during high-stakes federal hunts, exactly like this one. The true procedure is incredibly tedious, calculated, and way more rigorous than stuff you watch on primetime television. Grasping how that teardown works helps explain exactly how the blue Honda CRV turned into Nancy Guthrie's biggest wild card. Everything kicks off with extensive record-keeping. Prior to laying a finger anywhere, crime scene crews snap pictures of the entire ride, noting the steering chair position, how reflections are tilted, loose junk resting in drink slots or random dash paper slips, outerwear tossed in back seats. Every single item and texture gets logged in its untouched state. Because in forensics, placement paints a picture. An object's location holds weight, just like its identity. Afterward, deep diving begins. Detectives deploy specialized illumination tools, firing concentrated rays at exact frequencies to expose hidden residues regular bulbs miss entirely. Bodily fluids invisible to normal human vision will literally glow once hit with the correct spectrum. Tiny threads from someone's outfit smashed into the upholstery will light up like a beacon under those rays. Minuscule dirt particles tracked inside by a sneaker suddenly shine on a rug that looked completely clean moments before. None of this is made-up Hollywood stuff. It is strictly by-the-book federal procedure. The method shines because automobiles naturally trap and protect physical clues incredibly well. Just consider how vehicles gather secrets. Whenever someone slides into the driver's spot, they shed microscopic pieces of themselves. Gripping the latch to enter or exit forces a direct swap of dirt onto the hardware. Tossing gear into this cargo hold drops microscopic lint and dust from its previous location. Garments shed tiny strings. Backpacks transfer tiny specks of whatever surfaces they bumped into earlier. Unique environment dirt sticks to boot grips and rubs onto carpets. You cannot see it, yet it survives for weeks undisturbed. Automobiles basically act like airtight vaults. Shutting the windows locks all that microscopic evidence away from outside weather. Heavy breezes will not blow it around, nor storms wash it. The debris simply rests in the stitching upholstery strings and dark crevices biding its time. This explains exactly why federal tech units and lab experts poured massive funding into searching that Honda CRV. They hunted for way more than obvious clues. Investigators sought out the hidden traces the vehicle had silently collected and retained completely unnoticed. Standard procedure dictates a very strict routine here. Teams press sticky tape against the upholstery to pick up invisible threads. They run heavy-duty vacuums equipped with custom high-tech filter systems across the floor mats, grabbing specks completely invisible to the naked eye. Techs then rub cotton swabs over the steering wheel shifters and latches any spot handled by a person hunting for DNA. They peel away the cargo carpeting, then they pop open the wheel well and check that area too. Technicians rip out of the plastic trimming, hugging the cabin walls and the back hatch to hunt down whatever might be hidden or could have slipped through the cracks into those deeper gaps. Dave Max's coverage verified this exact scenario. Mechanics were actively rebuilding the automobile at a garage. It wasn't just quickly printed and handed over, it was totally reconstructed. Hearing that phrase lets us know the inspection stripped the ride completely bare right down to its frame. You don't call that a standard search. That is a total microscopic teardown. Think about what the detectives actually wanted to discover or eliminate here. The primary focus was geography. Cars soak up geographical breadcrumbs wherever they drive. The makeup of dirt, airborne allergens, and microscopic bits of earth. Because nature changes depending on where you are, lab experts can occasionally pinpoint exactly where those flecks originated. Should the crossover have visited any spot tied to Nancy's vanishing, tiny specks from that area might still be clinging to the rugs or trapped deep inside the cargo hold's fabric. Their next major concern involved biology. Did they find any physical trace of Nancy Guthrie lingering in the cabin that exceeded a standard 10-minute commute like a single follicle, dead skin smeared onto the latch, or any clue hinting at a ride longer than a quick favor? Their final query held just as much weight, but in reverse. Could detectives verify the car remained completely clear of any suspicious items? After all, dead ends aren't defeats. They represent forward momentum. When a hunch falls apart under a microscope, the suspect pool shrinks. It shifts manpower elsewhere. It pushes the hunt closer to reality, keeping teams on the right track. Officials have kept the actual lab findings pretty tightly under wraps. However, the case definitely didn't lose steam. Things sped up rapidly since right as crime scene techs tore apart the SUV, an entirely different batch of clues was making its way across lab benches in a neighboring state. These items completely ignored the automobile and focused entirely on the disguised person lurking on Nancy Guthrie's porch. Those specific clues were on the verge of triggering the biggest scientific breakthrough of the whole case. It was also the most aggravating. Out of every inch scrubbed down inside that Honda CRV, a single spot demanded intense scrutiny. This wasn't due to it being a super apparent target, but rather because time and time again, the cargo area consistently hides the best clues. For detectives, the back end of a ride carries massive evidentiary weight. Folks rarely give that spot a second thought during their usual routines. It just quietly gathers debris. Anything dropped back there, shopping sacks, gym gear, or a jacket thrown down on a freezing evening, creates a hidden log. Threads shed from clothing dirt tracks from the item's previous location, and crushed grit smashed into the upholstery by heavy loads. You can't spot any of this normally yet. Highly trained experts can pull every bit of it up. Experts handle the back hatch with the exact same meticulous precision used on the cabin, except they dial up their focus immensely. Prior to moving a single thread, they photograph the entire area from multiple angles. They map out the exact resting place of every item lying around inside. Techs shine specialized UV lights over the carpet way before ripping it up. Physical swabbing only starts once the paperwork is totally wrapped. They pat down the cargo bed with sticky patches, grabbing hold of completely invisible threads. Then they gently pull up the fabric to see what debris slid underneath, landing right on the bare metal, where dirt can easily hide untouched for months. They pop the spare wheel well and treat it like its own scene while inspecting the plastic sidings for anything that slipped through the cracks. Each swab gets bagged, tagged, and shipped off to the science guys, complete with a strict paper trail. It's pretty simple why detectives put so much elbow grease into searching a cargo hold. Stuff doesn't have to sit there forever, just to leave behind a clue. A quick bump does the trick. Tossing a backpack in there for 10 minutes transfers material straight off the canvas. Simply crushing a jacket into the carpeting for a few moments guarantees tiny strands will get left behind. Whenever an object moves between locations, it naturally picks up microscopic debris from its starting point. Earth fragments, organic matter, or manufacturing dust that experts occasionally link to exact spots. This concept became incredibly crucial during the Nancy Guthrie probe, primarily because detectives were not merely trying to figure out if somebody hid an illicit item in the back of that vehicle. Their focus was actually much sharper. Did a person or object occupy that cargo area, however temporarily, during that crucial time frame between 9:48 at night on January 31st and the early morning of February 1st? Furthermore, what physical trace remained? Reporter Brian Enton, covering the case locally from Tucson, outlined what insiders shared regarding the sheer intensity of the automotive sweep, drawing a direct parallel to the intensive Brian Kohberger inquiry. Enton detailed how crime scene technicians working high-profile cases will occasionally dismantle automobiles entirely, pulling out chairs, unhooking steering mechanisms, and ripping away inner trim. It goes beyond simple evidence gathering. It is about absolute certainty, making completely sure they have meticulously scoured every inch without overlooking a single detail. That exact scenario appears to be what played out with the Honda CRV. The automobile sent to a shop to get put back together had not just been lightly dusted, it was completely taken apart for a rigorous forensic breakdown. Furthermore, all signs point to the cargo hold getting that exact same meticulous teardown as the rest of the ride. Let us know your local time down below. Drop a comment telling us who is tuning in and your location while we analyze this mystery as a community. Now we reach a detail that official documents simply do not clarify just yet. Right now, neither the FBI nor the Pima County Sheriff's Department has released any official details regarding what they actually uncovered inside that back end. Here is what we know for sure. Relatives were officially ruled out on February 16th, yet the automobile stayed locked away in evidence storage for weeks afterward. Furthermore, whenever journalists pushed local law enforcement for a release timeline, they gave the exact same answer. The ride is slated for release, but no firm time frame exists yet. Let that timeline sink in for a second. Officially ruled out by February 16th. Yet the automobile stayed in police lockup through March 11th. 23 days passed between authorities publicly clearing the relatives and the moment that ride finally went home. Detectives rarely explain why they hang on to rides long after clearing the owners. There are completely valid legal justifications totally unrelated to criminal suspicion, such as ensuring nobody else tampered with the ride without the primary driver realizing it. Scanning for hidden GPS loggers that might indicate someone tracked the ride prior to January 31st. Making sure that no trace evidence inside the cabin connects to the perpetrator's path or the general timeline totally separate from the relatives themselves. Every one of those scenarios is highly viable. They all align perfectly with the relatives staying cleared, though the cargo hold secrets remain completely under wraps. Whatever clues it provided the crime lab, whether threads, debris, or biological DNA, or even a totally spotless report, it all fuels an ongoing, highly active pursuit that is clearly escalating toward a resolution. So, while the rear compartment remained at the facility, pending a comprehensive analysis of its contents, detectives had already redirected some attention toward a clue discovered entirely outside the automobile, sitting on the desert floor 2 miles from the Nancy Guthrie residence. A tiny item that initially seemed like the exact breakthrough this case desperately needed. Out in the Catalina Foothills, roughly 2 miles from the Guthrie property, searchers stumbled upon a lone glove. It was not instantly clear if the item held any real significance. During the initial phase of the hunt, civilian helpers and police units scoured absolutely every street, every single water trench, and all the barren landscapes circling that community. Crews picked up about 16 gloves total around the vicinity. Federal agents subsequently verified that the vast majority belonged to helpful citizens who tossed them while combing the terrain. Yet one stood out entirely. That specific handwear looked remarkably similar to what the disguised intruder wore on the front door security footage captured during the early morning of February 1st. Authorities swiftly shipped it off to a specialized Florida facility for evaluation. Forensic specialists evaluated the item with extreme precision. They successfully pulled genetic material from it, yielding an unidentified masculine profile, and subsequently processed that sample using the absolute best matching system accessible to domestic police, the Combined DNA Index System, often referred to as CODIS. The Federal Genetic Registry houses roughly 27 million unique individual profiles. That encompasses over 19 million samples from people found guilty of specific offenses nationwide. Since launching in the 1990s, this network has helped solve upward of 750,000 cases. Once genetic material gets uploaded into the federal system and finds a match, investigators can pinpoint a perpetrator in under 24 hours. Yet on February 17, 2026, Sheriff Chris Nanos faced the press to share news the task force was dreading. The genetic markers lifted off that discarded handwear failed to produce even one corresponding hit within the national CODIS registry. Every single registered criminal logged inside the countrywide network came back completely clear. Furthermore, it failed to align with genetic evidence found within Nancy Guthrie's home, nor did it link up with close relatives. Investigators had a genuine usable sequence pointing clearly toward an unidentified man. Yet it linked back to absolutely no one across America's most extensive forensic database, a finding that speaks volumes to detectives. The person whose bodily traces remained on the fabric has probably steered clear of any major legal trouble nationwide. They have zero serious convictions and never provided a swab to federal authorities. Detectives simply cannot type a name into a computer terminal and instantly pull up this suspect's rap sheet. According to formal police databases across the nation, this individual practically operated like a ghost. Until this moment, though, Sheriff Nanos refused to view this as a brick wall. The chief spoke carefully and intentionally during his press conference, pointing out that the item turned up 2 miles from the scene. Detectives additionally secured separate pairs located 5 miles and 10 miles out, meaning triage becomes absolutely crucial during such massive manhunts. Even though that handwear held serious value, it hardly represented the most crucial biological clue detectives had gathered. The real focus suddenly shifted to Nancy's property on February 13th, when Pima County authorities verified finding foreign genetic traces indoors that did not originate from the homeowner, nor did they belong to any cleared authorized guests. Hearing that verification completely redirected the forensic team's primary focus away from the highway debris and straight toward Nancy's living room. Since an object discovered 2 miles out demands quite a few logical leaps to successfully tie it back to a perpetrator. Biological material collected right from the living room bypasses all that guesswork, though this exact point introduced a massive scientific hurdle. Insiders familiar with the probe informed CBS News how lab technicians classified the household samples as low-level genetic material. It was neither missing nor inherently worthless, yet its deteriorated condition and microscopic size made pulling a clear, definitive sequence from the swab incredibly difficult. An insider explained the situation bluntly, noting they lacked sufficient biological matter to instantly lock down a trustworthy reading. Another police contact acknowledged that experts could potentially amplify these minute traces by utilizing cutting-edge forensic technology. Yet that specialized enhancement requires weeks or even months. Pima County deputies stated their partnered forensic facility down in Florida kept actively working to evaluate those swabs, though technicians remained unsure if they could isolate a fully workable sequence for the database. This exact roadblock perfectly sets the stage for ancestral DNA tracing. Detectives used this exact same methodology to finally unmask the Golden State Killer following 40 years of dead ends. This identical scientific approach successfully tied Brian Koberger to the brutal slayings of 4 Idaho college kids. This strategy operates completely unlike CODIS, skipping the standard method of checking sequences directly against registered convicts. Instead, investigators run the biological evidence through commercial heritage websites, essentially hunting for something other than the direct culprit. They specifically seek out distant family members sharing similar biological traits, letting genealogists reverse engineer a lineage pointing to the suspect. C.C. Moore Parabon Nanolabs lead ancestry specialist and a universally recognized pioneer in this specific industry spoke incredibly bluntly regarding the Guthrie investigation. She expressed absolute certainty that this advanced familial tracing method would ultimately unmask the person who left that trace evidence. She insisted it was purely a waiting game, yet every passing second carries a brutal urgency here compared to closed cases. This happens because America's top 3 heritage networks, notably Ancestry DNA and 23, and me, alongside my heritage, collectively harbor well beyond 50 million biological records, yet totally restrict police access unless explicitly ordered by a judge. Detectives currently remain stuck using minor voluntary platforms that contain fewer than 2 million user submissions. The perpetrator might be hiding inside those massive networks. Tracking him down remains entirely possible, though detectives currently lack the proper clearance to breach those platforms. Consequently, the biological material that could potentially expose Nancy Guthrie's abductor currently rests inside a Florida facility undergoing meticulous step-by-step analysis while desperate detectives concurrently chase down absolutely every other alternative avenue available. Surprisingly, one major breakthrough bypassed modern forensic science, completely arriving instead through the Postal Service. Just 2 miles away from Nancy Guthrie's residence, detectives spotted a glove resting along the shoulder of the road looking completely unremarkable and easily overlooked. Yet as soon as crime scene techs examined the fabric, it instantly turned into a crucial piece of physical evidence for the whole case. The reason being, this item looked completely identical to the ones sported by the disguised suspect caught on Nancy's porch footage that fateful evening. Identical brand matching shade and identical overall shape. Authorities quickly bagged the evidence, securing the package before shipping it out to an independent Florida facility for genetic testing. The whole nation held its breath, awaiting the outcome. Then come February 17, 2026. Sheriff Chris Nanos shared the findings with the press. The genetic material pulled from the fabric yielded 0 hits within CODIS, which is the federal government's main genetic registry, a massive nationwide catalog holding profiles for over 26 million individuals, mostly consisting of convicted criminals or suspects picked up for serious felony offenses. 0 direct matches, absolutely no partial flags, and 0 familial ties to anyone logged inside that network. This outcome revealed a highly crucial detail to the detectives. The person who dropped that evidence by Nancy Guthrie's property had probably never faced a major criminal arrest stateside. Authorities were not dealing with a known offender who already had an established rap sheet. They were tracking an unseen figure slipping completely under the radar of our nationwide databases. A suspect who before that evening on February 1, 2026 had somehow avoided leaving any biological traces across federal channels. Pause for a second and let the weight of that sink in. Detectives are hunting a suspect skilled enough to map out and pull off a highly orchestrated attack on an 84-year-old woman living inside a secure community, yet possessing absolutely 0 documented criminal history. Such a pairing is incredibly rare. It screams intense preparation. This instantly sparks major concerns regarding the suspect's identity, along with where they picked up the cunning expertise required to pull off exactly what the security clips captured. After all, those exact recordings remain among the most eye-opening clues we have in this entire mystery. Come February 10, 2026, the head of the Federal Bureau, Kash Patel, shared those front porch snapshots and video frames with the nation. Those visuals revealed a guy standing roughly 5'9" to 5'10", sporting an ordinary physique and a dark mustache peeking out from underneath his face covering. The man toted a dark rucksack, eventually recognized as a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiking bag, which is the exact model you can grab at Walmart for under $30. He seemed to have a gun strapped into a makeshift chest rig, though his actual actions near the lens ended up sparking the deepest psychological and investigative intrigue. There was 0 panic. The guy never tried bashing the glass or tearing the whole unit down off the brickwork. Instead, he stretched out toward some greenery sitting right by the front door, delicately grabbing a leaf to blind the sensor at a totally unhurried pace, with complete purpose, showing the exact type of composure you see from a person who mapped out their entire strategy beforehand and completely understands their time frame. Retired federal agent Johnny Grusing provided a psychological breakdown that entirely shifted the way both cops and ordinary citizens viewed that particular move. Grusing pointed out that simply blocking the lens instead of smashing it to pieces served a highly calculated purpose. Had the homeowner glanced at her security screen and spotted a disguised stranger glaring into the porch, she never would have unlocked the deadbolt. However, an obscured view creating a pitch-black monitor feels extremely confusing. That blank feed might simply mean the tech glitched out, or maybe a branch just scraped across the casing. It totally fails to trigger those instant alarm bells the way a masked intruder would. The attacker fully grasped this concept. By blinding the sensor, he drastically increased the chances of his victim stepping out to investigate the porch without having any clue about the nightmare waiting outside. Such deep foresight simply never happens on the fly. It takes serious practice. It takes heavy preparation. Plus, Sheriff Chris Nanos openly stated that the victim's residence was definitely singled out. They did not just stumble upon a random property in some arbitrary subdivision. The perpetrator hand-picked this exact piece of real estate. They monitored it closely. All of this leads authorities right back to the central mystery that has anchored this entire manhunt since day one. How exactly did the culprit figure out Nancy Guthrie's residential address, learn her daily schedule, and understand the exact floor plan of her estate? A web query made just days leading up to the abduction has emerged as a likely starting point. Detectives verified that a user browsed the web for Nancy Guthrie's home details, while simultaneously looking up Savannah Guthrie's yearly earnings, which ties perfectly into the extortion requests that popped up later. Those cyber footprints proved to law enforcement that choosing this victim was anything but a fluke. It was thoroughly vetted. A person literally sat behind a monitor, loaded up the exact location of an 84-year-old woman, checked out her daughter's identity, scoped out that daughter's income bracket, and started running the numbers. Well, this brings us to the massive turning point that completely flipped the genetic hunt upside down. Once the lab confirmed the MIT didn't trigger any database hits, detectives instantly shifted gears toward a far more advanced and intricate strategy. Investigative genetic genealogy, the exact same method used to finally nab the Golden State Killer following decades of dead ends. This identical tactic has successfully solved scores of unsolved mysteries nationwide ever since. C.C. Moore, Parabon Nanolabs' lead genetic genealogist and a top-tier authority in this sector, announced openly that she was absolutely certain this process would pinpoint the DNA source, saying point-blank that it was merely a waiting game. Yet suddenly, a totally unexpected twist occurred regarding that piece of evidence which had sparked so much hope for the detectives. That glove shipped down to Florida, which yielded a pristine genetic print and had everyone holding their breath for weeks, ended up belonging to a food service employee working at a joint right across the road from the discovery site. They had zero ties to the crime and weren't a suspect at all, just a random fluke of location and timing. The actual culprit's glove was still missing, meaning the most crucial genetic clues weren't sitting in the dirt 2 miles from Nancy's property. They were actually indoors. As crime scene technicians continued sweeping the house and car for clues, the Nancy Guthrie probe took a massive, unforeseen detour. It officially morphed into a hostage situation on Monday, February 2nd, 2026, when demands started rolling in just 24 hours after Nancy vanished. Instead of mailing the cops or the family directly, these demands went straight to the press. TMZ received a copy, and a couple of regional Tucson broadcasting channels got their own variations. The letters demanded $6 million in Bitcoin transferred to a distinct crypto account, establishing a cutoff of 5 p.m. on February 9th. The author guaranteed Nancy's safe return to Tucson within 12 hours of the funds clearing. Police profilers quickly caught onto a major clue regarding the chosen targets reaching out to Tucson. News crews means you actually know which local broadcasts hold weight. Having that kind of insider media savvy led detectives to believe the sender was intimately familiar with the layout of the Tucson community. TMZ shared that police insiders were currently working off the assumption that the blackmailer lived right around Tucson, basically a resident or someone with extensive neighborhood ties, completely ruling out a random faraway opportunist. Furthermore, the letters included highly guarded secrets that had never been leaked to the press, mentioning precise logistical facts regarding the house and how a specific exterior security light was messed with, along with mentions of Nancy's Apple Watch tracking history that nobody outside the immediate inner circle could possibly realize. All those highly accurate clues instantly elevated these demands far above the typical fake tips that flood famous abduction investigations. These weren't blind guesses, they were hard facts. Savannah Guthrie finally made a public statement on February 5th. Flanked by her brothers and sisters, she uploaded a clip talking straight to the individuals holding their mom captive. Speaking in a calm, focused tone, she confirmed they would cover the fee, but pleaded for evidence she was alive and a direct line of communication. She declared they still had faith their mother was alive out there, but eventually the February 9th cutoff drifted by. There was zero handover radio silence and absolutely no proof of life, though that crypto account from the letter actually registered some action. TMZ reported that cops tracked transactions hitting the address, though they kept the exact cash amounts and the sender's identity strictly under wraps. Furthermore, its link to the actual extortion plot remained completely up in the air. Then on February 4th, a solid 5 days before the crypto payment was even due, the case took a wild turn that sparked an instant wave of both utter bewilderment and absolute rage. A Hawthorne, California local named Derek Kayla fired off a pair of texts to Annie Guthrie and Thomas Oyen using a burner app specifically built to make anonymous calls. His message was incredibly short and direct. "Did you secure the Bitcoin? We're standing by on our side for the transaction to clear." 3 minutes after shooting those off, he rang a relative for exactly 9 seconds, allowing the FBI to track that fake digit within hours. The dummy account was literally registered under his actual email, and the IP data pointed straight to his California house. Once federal agents confronted him, Kayla openly confessed to firing off those texts. He claimed he'd been watching the drama unfold on the news and simply scraped their phone digits off a public database. He insisted he only shot over those texts to see if the relatives would actually bite and reply. The 42-year-old former L.A. County worker was handcuffed and hit with federal charges for demanding interstate extortion and utilizing electronics to terrorize or badger someone. He stepped into a California courtroom for the first time on February 6th, eventually walking out with heavy restrictions, like wearing an ankle monitor and a total ban on reaching out to anyone tied to this investigation. But here is the crucial forensic takeaway from this whole mess. Federal agents made one thing crystal clear. Kayla had absolutely zero ties to the initial extortion attempt. He was merely a fraud who noticed a grieving family's sheer vulnerability and shamelessly exploited it. While taking him down felt like a solid win for justice, it moved investigators absolutely nowhere closer to finding Nancy or tracking down her actual kidnapper. However, those authentic extortion letters brought a massive wave of complication to the case that detectives continue untangling today. If the actual kidnapper penned those messages, it sheds incredible light on what kind of operation this truly is. This was never some crime of opportunity. Cash was the sole driving force. They zeroed in on her specifically due to her daughter's high profile and substantial income, hoping to leverage that relationship into $6 million in crypto. That gives us a clear suspect outline. Though missing a few pieces, it shows detectives exactly who to hunt. They want an individual driven by greed who intimately knows the area, a person deeply familiar with NY's routine so they could coordinate the perfect ambush, an offender who contacted specific news networks while dropping confidential facts to prove their legitimacy. Yet despite all that meticulous planning, they haven't seen a dime yet. How are the skies looking in your neighborhood today? Let me know down below as we dive deeper into this mystery. The upcoming phase of the probe is exactly where the physical evidence gets incredibly rich, but infinitely more tangled. The extortion letters, the fake kidnapper, the quiet expiration of that crucial time limit. Every bit of this piles onto a stalled genetic inquiry, an ongoing automotive inspection that remains up in the air, and an unnamed person of interest whose face is currently plastered across every national television broadcast without a clear identity. This mix of real progress and glaring mysteries is exactly where the investigation has been stuck for over 40 days. And that frustrating reality hasn't changed a bit. Fast forward to February 16th, 2026, 16 days post-vanishing, when Sheriff Chris Nanos dropped a bluntly straightforward update, obviously penned by a man who had completely lost his temper over what the widespread media gossip had turned into. He declared that Nancy's entire inner circle spouses and siblings alike were completely ruled out as potential perpetrators. They weren't just pushed down the suspect list. Every single relative was fully exonerated. He doubled down with an airtight remark, leaving absolutely zero wiggle room, emphasizing their absolute compliance and grace while firmly reminding everyone that these relatives were hurting victims themselves. Claiming anything else, in his own words, wasn't just inaccurate, it was outright heartless. He then let slip a comment showing exactly how intense the backstage stress had grown, openly pleading with journalists to act ethically and to cover the tragedy with genuine humanity and respect. A top cop leading a massive national probe alongside 400 active detectives, backed by simultaneous genetic lab testing and ongoing extortion letter reviews, actually paused his massive workflow just to beg for simple human respect. That alone proves just how wildly out of hand the public rumors had gotten. Nanos went on to break down their procedural steps in super clear language. Relatives weren't just casually questioned and sent home. Detectives confiscated every smartphone and laptop they owned. Crime scene techs scoured their houses. Cops towed and analyzed their cars. And the whole family handed over everything, gladly putting up zero fight. He made sure to emphasize that point. 100% compliant. In any normal world, that declaration should have permanently shut down any internet chatter blaming the relatives. Yet they still didn't have their ride back. That lone detail anchored every discussion across newsrooms, police precincts, and internet sleuth forums long after they were formally ruled out. The relatives are off the hook. The SUV remains locked away. Both realities were true at once, leaving a massive logical hole that authorities simply refused to clarify to the press. By March 11, 2026, exactly 23 days since the formal exoneration, that blue Honda CRV was still sitting locked up tight at the Puma County Sheriff's Department. But instead of a crime lab, it was sitting in a garage getting rebuilt. Journalist Dave Mack verified that exact nugget on the Crime Stories podcast back on March 10th, spelling out plainly that authorities hadn't let go of the ride just yet, keeping it away from the Guthries while a mechanic pieced it back together after a grueling physical teardown. Whenever reporters cornered the Puma County cops about a timeline, they got the exact same intentionally dodgy non-answers. Officials stated they were working on giving the car back to the relatives, though they could not provide a specific timeline. Saying things are currently underway definitely does not sound like a closed case. That phrasing suggests matters are still actively being figured out. Journalist Brian Enton pushed hard for answers regarding this issue, contacting the local precinct repeatedly to get more details. Every single response matched exactly. The automobile is currently getting prepped for release. Enton pointed out to viewers that holding on to the ride this long seemed incredibly odd, even after clearing the relatives. He brought up the Brian Koberger situation to offer some perspective. In that instance, detectives literally tore a car apart, taking out chairs and dash sections to finish their thorough check. That kind of deep dive takes way more than a few days. It only wraps up once the forensic techs verify their findings. Now think about what ex-federal agent Jennifer Coffender shared during her media appearances regarding this mystery. Normally, an automobile goes right back to its driver the moment police finish collecting physical clues. Handing over the keys is pretty simple once both the ride and its associated people are officially ruled out. Coffender pointed out that this massive delay basically hints at a couple of different scenarios. Either the forensic tests from the transport are still up in the air and require matching against other clues from the massive probe, or detectives uncovered something inside the interior that needs further explanation before they can shut that door entirely. Neither of these options implies the relatives committed any crime. The head officer explicitly stated this fact. While the relatives remain cleared, both situations prove the automobile remains a crucial piece of the puzzle. Plus, there is another subtle piece of information adding depth to this whole situation. Police actually seized more than just the Honda CRV. They also grabbed a second ride, pulling her very own Subaru out of the carport the exact afternoon they showed up. People barely talk about that particular automobile in the news. But grabbing it for the forensic search proves the cops were not simply zooming in on one specific suspect. They conducted a massive sweep of every single ride tied to her final whereabouts and immediate surroundings. A chopper flying close to the ground used tracking gear to pick up weak frequencies from her heart monitor, but they found absolutely nothing concrete. Federal authorities visited a huge number of firearm shops around the Tucson region right after she vanished. Investigators reached out to multiple regional Walmart stores about the Ozark trail bag and the face covering spotted on the porch security video, since both objects strongly resembled merchandise typically or exclusively purchased at that retail giant. Detectives were actively chasing down every single possible lead. The automobile was just one angle, yet people stayed fixated on it, since it was Nancy Guthrie's final location right before the bay shut at 9:48 in the evening. And whatever rode out of that property that dark evening, whether it left microscopic clues or turned up absolutely pristine, or yielded samples currently under the microscope, that ride still has plenty of secrets to reveal. 41 days into the search, Sheriff Chris Nanos did an interview with NBC News and dropped a bombshell that completely silenced everyone watching. We think we understand the reason behind his actions. We strongly suspect this was planned, though we cannot say that with 100% certainty. Take a second to process that. The top cop handling one of the most highly publicized disappearances across the nation. A guy commanding more than 400 detectives, managing multi-state lab results and sifting through 40,000 documented leads. That official stared right at the lens and claimed he essentially figured out the motive, yet he refuses to reveal it and isn't quite confident enough to lock it in completely. That declaration serves a dual purpose. It shows they are actually making real headway in the hunt. Also, it proves the biggest mysteries surrounding this whole ordeal remain officially unsolved. Former murder investigator Phil Ramos, who spent 30 years with the Vegas Metro Police, gave his immediate take on those comments. Understanding the motive, Ramos noted, is forever a crucial piece of the puzzle. However, its true value relies heavily on tying it directly to access and resources. Having a reason without nailing down a specific culprit or the exact way they pulled it off just points you down a path. It doesn't close the deal. It simply gives authorities an idea of who would have the desire to pull off the crime. It still hasn't revealed the actual culprit, which explains why this 41-day mystery currently exists in two totally separate realities. The initial concept suggests this was a hit driven by money, orchestrated by a stranger possessing neighborhood familiarity and tech-savvy skills. Ultimately, every single piece of tangible proof keeps leading detectives right down this particular avenue. Instead of shattering the security lens, they just masked it using nearby leaves. That knapsack, a makeshift weapon holder, plus digging around online beforehand to find Nancy's residence and figure out what Savannah makes. Those extortion letters mailed directly to specific local broadcasters containing secret house specifics that were never released to the media. Every single clue suggests an individual who carefully plotted against a chosen mark, carrying out the attack with deep forethought rather than acting on a whim. Ex-intelligence operative and federal investigator Tracy Walder took her on-air assessment a step beyond that. According to her, there is zero chance this was just a simple break-in gone horribly wrong. Thieves looking to steal stuff do not snatch people, she pointed out, because carrying someone off kills their speed and makes getting caught way more likely. Instead, the video clips and physical clues point toward an attacker motivated by a deep fixation on the television anchor or some personal vendetta against her, Walder noted. Going after her defenseless elderly mom, who lived by herself at a residence, easily tracked down on the web, perfectly aligns with that theory. On March 12th, the local sheriff officially announced to reporters that detectives are currently exploring whether the perpetrator deployed a signal blocker or intentionally tampered with the power during the evening the woman vanished. He mentioned they have a specific chronological window showing exactly when various systems disconnected. Authorities are trying to figure out if those outages were done on purpose as part of the attacker's master scheme. An electrical panel down the street from the house looked like it had been messed with, though the sheriff noted they cannot entirely prove it is connected to the kidnapping yet. But detectives are certainly not dismissing the possibility either. This clue brings a whole new dimension to the suspect's timeline that police are trying to piece together. If the network drop was purposeful, meaning the intruder actively killed or blocked the community's connection right before walking up to the door, then we are looking at a degree of technological sophistication far beyond what simply hiding from a porch lens would imply. Keep in mind the other massive avenue this ongoing search is taking right now. Genetic traces discovered indoors, specifically a blend of physical samples gathered from the crime area, remain under analysis at the crime lab. So far, running the incomplete strands through the national system brought back 0 hits. Experts are currently diving deep into ancestral tracking to find relatives. CC Moore and her crew over at Parabon Nanolabs feel completely sure this method will uncover an identity in due time, but waiting is agonizing. Right now, the available genetic data is considered extremely fragmented by government agents, making it too weak to trigger a federal database hit or build a complete family tree. Where do you land on all this? Leave your thoughts down below. Option 1, a lone wolf stranger driven by money and intense fixation, operating basically solo. Or Option 2, a deeply intricate plot requiring intimate details about Nancy's routines and health struggles, stuff you could never just search up online. Let us know your take, but here's the common thread between both ideas. The person who abducted the elderly woman on the morning of February 1, 2026 did their homework, memorizing her exact location. They spotted the surveillance angles and understood the porch setup perfectly, allowing them to obscure the view using nearby bushes. The intruder fully realized an 84-year-old resident with walking issues and a weak chest was sitting by herself indoors past 9:48 at night. The county sheriff put out a community alert a few days ago highlighting just how wide open this mystery truly is. Never assume you are immune just because this tragedy struck a famous television personality's household. Stay sharp and vigilant. Hearing the top detective tell locals that the kidnapper might strike another target does not sound like an investigation wrapping up anytime soon. It sounds like an active, expanding hunt. I am still desperately searching for that single crucial clue we are missing as of March 14, 2026. Exactly 42 days have passed since the victim vanished, and earlier today the lead detective went on national television for a fresh update. While millions of viewers and anxious relatives tuned in, the head lawman running one of the most massive manhunts in modern memory gave a briefing filled with both solid breakthroughs and frustrating dead ends. He claimed they are getting warmer and making headway, yet the missing grandmother is still nowhere to be seen. 0 suspects are in custody, and the mystery man broadcast across every network for the last 6 weeks is still nameless. Let us break down exactly where all the moving parts of this massive search are currently sitting. Plus, that blue SUV serving as the focal point of our whole video has finally been given back to the relatives. Detectives officially cleared the car this morning, handing it over to her loved ones following an incredibly thorough sweep for evidence. Giving the car back doesn't mean its part in the forensic investigation is over. It simply shows that detectives feel they've gathered all the necessary evidence. Whether the lab pulled out Fiber's microscopic traces dirt or absolutely nothing, those findings are currently sitting in an active case file alongside all the other clues. The vehicle told its story. Its secrets are now kept strictly between the crime lab and the detectives working the case. Analyzing the DNA is the toughest and most crucial active element, and Nanos confirmed recently that the blended organic samples found inside Nancy's home might hold genetic markers. From multiple individuals and specialists point out that pulling one clear profile out of a blended sample is incredibly difficult scientifically. That effort continues today. The incomplete genetic sequence they have hasn't triggered a database hit yet. They are currently exploring family trees. This method requires months rather than weeks, but it has cracked mysteries that sat cold for years, so detectives are sticking with it. A car caught on a doorbell camera roughly 2.5 miles from Nancy's house at 2:36 in the morning on February 1st, which perfectly matches the time frame her heart monitor lost connection still hasn't been tracked down. Authorities acknowledged they know about it and are trying hard to track it down, along with hundreds of thousands of other cars filmed locally that evening. The official search using scent dogs is completely paused now. Sheriff Nanos stated the canines can be brought back later if necessary, but their active deployment is halted. A strategic change hinting that police are pivoting from wide-scale ground sweeps to a phase focused on organizing specific clues. Lawyer Peter Christensen nailed it when he mentioned to Newsweek that the probe transitioned from community appeals to strict data organization. They are zeroing in, though the trap hasn't snapped shut. The United Cajun Navy handed a thorough 41-page strategy document to Sheriff Nanos toward the end of February. They volunteered tracking hounds and high-tech drones to scour the harsh landscape of the Catalina Foothills. As of right now, Nanos hasn't accepted their help, worrying it might accidentally interfere with an ongoing legal case. This choice sparked backlash from various police experts who claim extra manpower in such brutal areas would be incredibly beneficial. The Guthrie family is still offering a $1 million bounty for clues that point straight to finding Nancy. The FBI hotline stays open at 1-800-CALL-FBI. The Pima County Sheriff Hotline is 52035-149. More than 40,000 leads have poured in, and authorities are reviewing all of them. Savannah Guthrie took a break from the Today Show after her mom vanished. She made a quick comeback to the set recently, not to host, but just to be around her coworkers, to show gratitude and maintain a sense of normalcy that keeps her grounded while detectives keep digging. She shared a message on Instagram saying they feel all the support and good thoughts from their neighborhood Tucson locals and people nationwide. Please keep sending positive energy and holding on to hope. Bring her home. That simple phrase captures the entire situation. Bring her home. It's been 41 days. A single disguised suspect completely missing from national records. A single car inspected by forensics and returned. A fragmented genetic sequence still being built at the lab. A single extortion cutoff that passed completely silently. A family gathering by a Tucson home dropping off flowers at an expanding memorial the entire town has been contributing to since February. Plus, an 84-year-old lady who grabbed dinner with her relatives on January 31st, pulled up in a blue Honda CRV, saw her garage shut at 9:48 at night, and vanished without a trace. This investigation hasn't gone cold. It isn't stuck in neutral. It has entered that tedious, careful stage major national cases hit once the easy clues dry up and the lab work begins to shine. This stage stays hidden. It barely generates any major headlines. However, this is exactly how you put together a rock-solid trial. If you have any information whatsoever regarding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, contact the FBI. Phone the sheriff's office. Make the call today. Also, if you followed this series since episode 1, we really appreciate you. Smash the subscribe icon, drop your thoughts below, and send this to anyone who needs to hear Nancy's story. Since bringing more awareness to this situation makes it incredibly tough for the culprit to remain under the radar, Nancy Guthrie needs to be brought back, and this fight is far from finished. The chilling reality of Nancy Guthrie's story isn't just that a fragile 84-year-old grandmother vanished into the cold Arizona night. It is that her nightmare began in the exact place we all believe we are untouchable home. Behind automated garage doors and the quiet comfort of an affluent neighborhood, a calculated predator patiently watched. Her tragedy violently shatters the comfortable illusion that a sturdy deadbolt or a peaceful zip code provides absolute sanctuary. The most profound lesson we must pull from the darkness of this investigation is a painful, urgent wake-up call regarding our vulnerable loved ones. Our elders who carry a lifetime of grace and fiercely guard their independence are too often left unseen by our fast-paced world, yet they remain deeply visible to those with malicious intentions. True security extends far beyond a high-tech camera mounted on a porch. It is the unwavering watchful eye of a fiercely connected community. It means actively checking in on the elderly neighbor who lives alone and refusing to ignore the subtle signs of danger in our own backyards. We cannot rely solely on delayed forensic labs to keep our families breathing. We must step up as the absolute first line of defense for our parents and grandparents. Awareness is our strongest shield. Let Nancy's heartbreaking disappearance be the catalyst that forces us to look out for one another a little more fiercely tonight.